Hi, Facebook live stream listeners. Welcome. We are so happy to have you with us today. You are once again backstage with Change It Up with Paula Shaw Radio. And we have a very special guest today. I'm so glad you're with us because we have psychology and wealth expert Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, founder of KBK Wealth Connection and author of the book Breaking Money Silence and also the podcast Breaking Money Silence. So we're going to have some really wonderful, fun things to be talking about because both Kathleen and Cheri Blair, who you see here next to me, who you all know, Cheri's been a sponsor of our show, and she is all about financial empowerment for women as well. So since in 2 seconds I'm going to be doing their whole bios, without any further ado, I will just go ahead and start this. And thanks for joining us. And please stay with us. We've got a lot of great information for you today. Okay. You ready, Miss Cheri?
Yes, I am, Paula. I'm really excited about this. Yes.
Okay, cool. And Kathleen, would you like to say hello to our Facebook listeners?
Hello, everybody. I'm sorry I can't see you today, but I love Facebook Live, and I'm excited for the conversation.
Woohoo! Okay, Here we go, ladies. And welcome to Change It Up with Paula Shaw Radio. We are so happy to have you back with us. As promised in this segment, Cheri Blair, our sponsor, and Cheri Blair of Cheri Blair Financial Services will be joining me to interview Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, author of this book, Breaking Money Silence, and actually several others, and also host of a podcast called Breaking Money Silence. So let me tell you just a little bit about both of these ladies before we get going. Kathleen Burns Kingsbury is a wealth psychology expert, and she is the founder of KBK Wealth Connection and, as I just mentioned, host of Breaking Money Silence podcast. She's an internationally published author of several books, including the one we just named, and she was voted one of the top 9 speakers by Investment News. She's also a writer for several publications. Kathleen has appeared on television and has written for publications like the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, PBS Hour, Money Magazine, Today, Money, Forbes. Oh, my goodness. I think there's nothing she hasn't been printed in. And we'll be talking with Kathleen in just a moment. But co-hosting with me today is Cheri Blair. Cheri's been serving entrepreneurs and business owners in the financial industry for over 2 decades, but she, like Kathleen, is especially focused on empowering women. She joined MetLife Financial Services as a financial advisor, received training from leaders in the industry before discovering her passion for serving women. It was then she began presenting informative seminars to educate women, and she is still doing that to this day. And for those of you who have heard her on this show before, you know she's all about empowering women to grow beautiful financial futures. So thank you, Cheri, for co-hosting with me today with this very special guest of ours, Kathleen Burns Kingsbury.
Right. I'm so excited, Paula,
Yes, I think we both are, and we're chomping at the bit with questions, but I'll let you ask one first.
Okay, Kathleen.
Yes.
You're there with us, okay.
Of course I am.
Yes.
I'm patiently waiting for my first question.
There you go. I want to ask a little bit about why women need to break money silence. So you talk about that and be financially literate to achieve financial parity. So what is money silence, and how does it impact individuals, couples, and families? Can you share a little bit about that with us?
Sure, absolutely. Money silence is a term that I use that really describes the discomfort that many of us have talking about finances with other people, maybe with your partner, with your aging parent, with your kids, or it can be certainly at work. And in fact, one of the startling statistics is that almost half of Americans, so 44% of Americans, would rather discuss death, dying, religion, or politics than talk about personal finance with their loved ones.
Oh,
so
my God.
Pretty, especially what's going on in our world today, that's quite a statement.
It certainly
money
is.
silence is really something that I think we need to break through, because not talking about money ultimately really hurts us.
Right, absolutely.
And, I think that's a really important point, Kathleen. How does it hurt us? In what ways?
Well, it really depends on the individual, but in general, when we look at the different ways in which not talking about money or the taboo against talking about money hurts us, in the general public, it's about 50% of marriages, right? We all know 50% of first marriages end in divorce. But when you look at the key contributors, often one of the top ones is financial conflict. And I think that's because couples aren't taught how to talk about money and work through their financial differences, and sometimes that can snowball into itself. When you look at parents trying to pass on financial literacy to their kids, 69% of parents feel more comfortable, believe it or not, talking to their teens about sex than investing.
Oh, my God.
And when I present that, I get a lot of looks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Right? And my belief is, if they have kids, they've probably had sex, and they know how to do that on some level, but it doesn't mean that they know how to do investments or be financially literate in a variety of other areas. So they don't have a roadmap for it. And certainly, just to finish up, I think with women, what ends up happening is when women aren't able to engage in these money conversations, they end up facing financial discrimination, whether that's not being paid what they're worth in the workplace, primarily based on their gender, or whether that's, they're a businesswoman and they're going to get a loan and they face financial discrimination at the bank. So I think these are all tied together to really have a negative impact on many, not everybody, but many people in our society.
I'm curious. I certainly remember back in my college days that, one of the big fights was we weren't being paid anywhere near what a man was being paid, even doing the same job in an hour. What is the status of that situation now, Kathleen? Is it still unequal?
Unfortunately, it is, and this is on average, but if you look at a woman who's working full-time compared to a man in the same job, they make about 80 cents to every man's dollar, and if you look at women of color, that number decreases dramatically. I think it's like 64 cents to every man's dollar. So we have a long way to go to close that gap. And obviously what we've been trying to do for decades now is not necessarily working. So we need to try something else.
And
Well,
go ahead, Cheri.
I was going to say, absolutely, we have to. It just, when I think about that from, you were saying when we were in college till now, and you're saying that the statistics are 80%. Or 80 cents on every dollar, 80 cents on every dollar. And then it's even, what'd you say, 64 for women of color? Oh, my. It's
shocking.
It is, really.
In this day and age that problem exists at all. I would have thought in the last 20 or 30 years we would have made more progress. It's truly
well, and
shocking.
part of what, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, so to speak, but I think part of what has happened is there's been some corporate change, and even more so recently, where people, major companies are saying, no, we are going to pay women and men the same. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction, but there's also this individual piece about, how do you learn how to negotiate your salary, ask for your fee, talk about money.
Yes.
All of those things are things that we can do as individuals. And it may be uncomfortable if you're not used to it, but with practice, it gets easier. And the other thing is, if you feel like, I can't do this for myself, ideally you would, but then do it for the next generation of women that are coming up, because I really, really think we can change things if we influence this next generation to be able to think, why not ask for exactly what a man's being paid? It doesn't make any sense. This generation is so good at not really getting caught up in all the differences and the polarization of previous generations. So let's make that true around money as well.
I think that's great. I do think that's great.
Is that a topic that you cover in any of your books, Kathleen? Because, as you're saying this about they don't know how to negotiate, they don't know how to ask, for what they want. I'm thinking, wow, that's so important. Where can women turn to learn those things?
Well, I think to answer your direct question, I do offer tips and tools for people in general on how to talk about money, and in particular how women can learn what their money talk mindset is, how they can negotiate better. I think my most recent book, Breaking Money Silence, probably highlights those tips and tools more actively than some of my previous books, which were more professionally focused. But I also think there's a wealth of other people out there in your life that probably know how to do this, or at least can coach you how to do this. And one of the biggest things that I recommend women do is actually turn to a man in your life and say, how do you negotiate your salary? Because chances are they have tips and tools and skills that maybe you don't, or a different perspective that can be really useful. And I know for myself, negotiating deals, I often turn to my husband and I say, am I being too much of a female in this situation, And he often has a very good, more rational perspective on it. And it's been really helpful over the years to be able to do that.
Yes. Do you feel, Kathleen, that the reason we women have been sort of crippled when it comes to both financial literacy and to negotiating the things we're talking about, is that just because of the way things were traditionally in this country, that men took the lead financially, women were supposed to be in charge of the home and the children?
I do think it's partly because women haven't had much practice. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, right? If you're young, you feel like it was forever ago. But if you're Gen Xer or Boomer, kind of like we are, it was only a few decades ago where women actually started working outside of the home. And only recently has it become even a topic that women could be female breadwinners and maybe, call the shots financially in their house. But we live in a society that is so ambivalent about women, money, and power.
Right.
And there's so many myths about women that it's really important to clear those up.
I really agree.
Yes, I know that one of the things that, when talking about doing the show and everything and some of the questions that we went over, you talked a little bit about this, the financial literacy crisis in our country. And you were saying statistically that 40% of Americans couldn't pass a financial literacy quiz. And it's interesting because Paula and I have been working with a financial literacy quiz from the American College, and we found that and this was just in 2017, that 80% of women who were at retirement age between the age of 60 and 75 failed that quiz. Failed the quiz.
Oh, wow.
So,
That's huge.
That is huge. And you were just alluding to this women, power, and money. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that, because you were talking about I know there's cultural, there's the financial industry. I mean, obviously, because I'm in it, I'm one of the forerunners. In my community, I'm up there and wanted to do everything I can to help the women.
So let's talk about all those things when we come back from the break, Cheri, because that all sounds like pretty important info.
Right. I was jumping into it.
We'll be right back with Kathleen Burns Kingsbury. Okay, Kathleen.
Sorry about that, Kathleen. Paul had to show me. I was getting ready to go into
we were
it.
coming up on a stop. So
Yeah. That was good. That was good.
All right. So just a reminder to our Facebook live stream listeners, this is backstage. So you're actually watching the radio show being created. So you will be talking about what we're going to deal with in the next segment, and then we'll be back to recording the show. All right.
Right.
So you want to lead off with?
Yes, I'm going to go right into this question you gave us, Kathleen. Talk a little bit more about the cultural and what we can do in the financial industry and the challenges about women, money, and power. How about that?
That is good. Can I address the myth about women and financial literacy really quick, and then you can ask that question?
Sure. Yes.
Sure.
I think that's a great idea.
Sure.
And
because I have a little bit of a different view that might be interesting.
Okay, good.
Perfect. And Kathleen, we want to be sure, I may even do this in the middle and again at the end of the segment, we want to be sure we give your contact info.
Okay, whenever it's at the end is fine.
Okay. All right, dear, if you're ready, we'll bring this back.
I am ready.
Welcome back to Change It Up with Paula Shaw Radio. We are talking about breaking money silence today, if you're just joining us. And our guest is Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, who is the author of Breaking Money Silence, as well as a podcast host herself of the same title. And I highly recommend to everyone that you tune into that show because she gives great tips, and she's talking especially about empowering women financially, because we were just discussing in the last segment, we're a little behind. We ladies are a bit behind because of the cultural norms and several other reasons. So let's just jump right back in. And Cheri, you want to ask? By the way, my co-host, Cheri Blair, is by my side here. And she, of course, is Cheri Blair of Cheri Blair Financial Services. So she knows what she's talking about when it comes to money. All right, Cheri, you were asking Kathleen a question.
Yes, Kathleen, we were talking about financial literacy, and I was sharing with you a quiz and the statistics from that Paul and I have been using over the last couple shows. And you wanted to share something about that with us?
Yeah. No, it's interesting, and there's different stats all over the place. I think one of the myths that I see, and I think the myth that I see is that there's this belief that's in the financial services industry, that's in our culture, that somehow women are much more financially illiterate than men. Now, the caveat is you did your own quiz, and it was of a certain generation, and that could be a carve-out that might be different. But when you look at the numbers in general, what you find is on a basic financial literacy exam that 39% of men pass it and 35% of women. Oh. So we're only talking a couple percentage points. But in the media, in the industry, we're talking much, much more about women's financial literacy than men's. So overall, I think there's a clue. Mm-hmm. But also women have had less practice and I think have less financial confidence. And that financial confidence leads them to not talk about money, to not take an active role in their lives, or to really say, I'll worry about it later, and ultimately ends up, being a negative thing in their life. So I do agree that we need to be focused on financial literacy education, but even more so, boosting women's confidence to say, hey, you can know about numbers. You don't need to be an expert in everything. And if you have a good financial advisor or counselor near you, you will be fine. And so I just wanted to make that distinction because I think it's a little bit different than what we sometimes hear.
Absolutely. I agree with you, and I'm so glad you shared that because, looking at 39 and 35, the gap, obviously, the percentage is not that wise. And yes, the quiz that we were using, the statistics we've been using, have been particularly women at that time in their life when they're either getting ready to retire or just have retired. So let's say 60 to 75, and we're focused on that. So anyway, I think you made some very good points here, but you also talk a little bit about this idea of women, money, and power, and why we think now is the time to talk about that?
Actually, earlier today, I just did an interview, and one of the things that I sometimes say is, time's up for money silence. Obviously, that's a play on the Me Too movement and the Time's Up Foundation that we're all familiar with. And I just think there's been a cultural shift where women, by and large, have said, we're going to stand up for what we believe, whether that's, no more sexual harassment in the workplace, whether that's gender pay equity, or something else. And so what's interesting is as a collective group, we're using our voices more and more. But the pushback is that our society and a lot of members of our society, and not just men, by the way, I think have trouble figuring out, well, how do we think about women who have their own money and who are powerful? I feel as if we're still very ambivalent about that. And here, I'll fess up. I'll give an example from my own life. I'm the female breadwinner in our house. Over the course of the marriage, it's gone up and down. So sometimes it's him, sometimes it's me, but lately it's been me. And one of the things I said to him the other day, which is not really a very empowered statement, as I said, I feel like that's my responsibility, that shines poorly on me. Now, I am empowered enough not to iron. So he's going to walk out wrinkled. But the fact that I still have that belief that somehow that reflects on me as a wife is so 1950s.
Yes,
and so that's my own ambivalence about where am I in this whole mix. And I think a lot of us have pockets where that stuff starts to come up. And you start to think, I want to be powerful, but I know that people, don't necessarily like financially powerful women. Have different thoughts about it. So I really think it's a double-edged sword for women out there who are negotiating their salary or looking to be more actively involved in their financial lives.
And
what do you think, Cheri? Do you see that?
I was going to say that I agree with you very much on that one. Just even in my own life as well, and even growing up, I can remember if I was, I have 5 brothers and I'm the only girl, so if I was strong and fought for something to get what like the boys did, that was okay, but that was not appropriate for me to do that. And so I watched as I grew and as into my adulthood, and I've seen that work out in my profession, working in institutions with a lot of males. As you know, financial institutions oftentimes have a lot of men running them. So, or at least they have in the past. So, yes, I have found that
80%. Yep.
Yeah, there you go. So I found that to be true. Yes, it's like if you're too strong and you assert yourself too much, then it's like you're not feminine. And I love
Exactly.
something you had said in here about just because you're putting out what's important to you and being authentic about it does not make you any less feminine than it does if you just be quiet and don't say a thing because that was what's expected of us.
That's such a huge point. That's kind of what I was going to add, that I feel like women get short shrift sometimes because if a man is a good negotiator, he's a tough guy in the negotiation, everybody admires him and wow, he's a tough negotiator. If it's a woman, she's a bitch. Right? Or some negative thing is said about her.
That's right.
And so I think that's part of the problem too, Kathleen, that women don't want to step into being perceived as a bitch or unfeminine and all of that. It's
Right.
tricky for us.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and a very quick story. I have a young person in my life, and she was going in to negotiate her salary, and she called me and asked me some questions, and we brainstormed what she should do. And she went in. She was a little nervous, but she went in and she asked for a raise. And actually, the HR department, the head of it, called her greedy when she asked for more money. Now, I doubt they have ever called a male employee greedy.
Exactly.
And so this young person actually stood up and said, I am not greedy. I am asking for X, Y, and Z because of X, Y, and Z. She had done her homework and kind of showed that she deserved it based on the increased responsibilities in her job description.
Wow.
She ultimately got the raise, I think unrelated, but ultimately this HR director left. It was time for her to go. And it really speaks to the fact that this still goes on. I think
absolutely.
The upside is my friend actually started coaching her other colleagues who are all like in their mid-20s, 30s. And so now they're all teaching each other how to negotiate. And so that's where I see the hope of like we can make a difference, one person by one person, to start to learn these skills and to support each other in speaking up.
It's huge. It's just huge. So what are some ways that women can break the money silence, Kathleen?
Yes, give us some advice. Yes.
I think, the first thing is to be mindful and to be aware of what are your automatic thoughts and beliefs about engaging in a money conversation. So, what's the most difficult financial conversation for you? It may be salary negotiation. It may be, talking about the budget with your partner. It could be different for different people. What's the easiest conversation? What did you learn growing up about money talk? So to be mindful and to be aware of what are these messages that you're carrying around, to kind of tie back to those concepts you talked about earlier, to really bring the subconscious thought into conscious thought. And then once you're able to say, oh, wow, I believe this, then as an adult you have a choice. Do I want to continue to believe that talking about money is rude or uncomfortable or unnecessary, or do I want to start to practice it and figure out where is it socially appropriate? Where am I comfortable talking about money? And then build up that muscle and that skill. I do think that, women who are out there should definitely keep listening to your podcast, but they can check out breakingmoneysilence.com /podcast, or go to iTunes for Breaking Money Silence. Every episode we talk about a money myth and we bust it wide open.
Ooh,
and not only will that help you if you listen as an individual, if you're listening with somebody else, you can then start a conversation, not about each other's money situation, but about this whole money myth. And it's a great way to start the conversation in a less intimidating way. So be mindful, start to become aware, and then certainly listen to programs like yours and mine that help you kind of engage in these conversations that are a little less threatening.
And Kathleen, if people want to learn more about you and your work, where can they find you?
The best place to go is my website, breakingmoneysilence.com. There are some free tip sheets on how to talk about money. You can also take a look and get a sample chapter from my latest book, Breaking Money Silence, and you can get the podcast information there. So it's, that's probably the best place for people to go. I'm also on social media on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Okay,
Yes,
and the
yes.
website again is
.com /podcast.
Oh, that's if you're doing the podcast. But just
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
breakingmoneysilence.com is the website, right?
Right,
Kathleen?
right.
Tried to make it easy and simple for everybody.
I just want to say
Beautiful.
your podcast, for anybody that hasn't heard them, Breaking Money Silence, are wonderful. I love them. They just populate into my phone on a weekly basis, and I hear them as I'm running or driving or whatever. They're just wonderful. So much information.
Thank you, Cheri. That's sweet.
It is. It's true. It's true.
And Kathleen, I want to thank you so much for being with us today. This has been invaluable information. I'm excited about your book, and we will certainly be encouraging everybody to get a copy. And I imagine it's available on Amazon. Is that correct?
Yes, everything's available on Amazon.
Yes,
It's available
That's right.
to you.
In all areas of life, right?
Right.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun to have this conversation.
Our
Yes,
pleasure.
so fun.
Thank you, Kathleen. Take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Kathleen, are you there?
I am. I can see you guys. I turned you on mute. So
Oh,
I
you
can see
did?
but you're-
Oh, okay,
But you're delayed,
how
so then I had to stop watching you because it was getting a little confusing.
Yeah. I know. I could not do it because then two things at the same time.
Right, right.
This was so great. Such good information, Kathleen. I'm definitely going out to get a copy of your book and giving it to all the women I know as well. This
Well, I
was
appreciate it.
incredibly helpful. Well,
Absolutely. I should have given you a book. I've been giving the book away, so I have some books. I'll give
all
you
right.
one. How's that?
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think this is something that we should do again at some point because there's so much I wanted to ask you that we just didn't even have time to ask you. So we'll just have to see if we can work out a time that you can come back again, Kathleen.
Sounds good. You guys, thanks for breaking money silence with me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Our
Absolutely.
pleasure.
All right.
So
Take care.
Facebook listeners will be finishing up the show here, but Kathleen is going to say goodbye. Can you say goodbye to them, Kathleen?
Bye, all my Facebook Live friends. I'll see you soon.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, dear. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, we can actually do the last segment without headphones on.
All righty. All righty.
So that'll be good. So how about if we just kind of recap some of the things that she talked about that are important.
Okay.
You want to do that? And then I've got a question I'm dying
Okay,
to ask
okay.
one of you. All right, so here we go. And then I'm going to just at the very end,
Right, right.
I think I'm going to just talk a little bit once you and I kind of wrap up
Uh-huh.
that part.
Uh-huh.
Then I'm just going to talk a little bit about. Do I want to do that? Is that a good idea? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Then I'm going to go back to the point I was making early on about money blocks. I'm going to say something about.
Okay.
that.
Okay. I have
Okay.
this right here. Mhm.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh,
In
good.
case you want to review or talk
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a
thank
good
you.
idea.
That was so helpful when you put that in front of me.
I know. I
Is-
saw you scrambling.
Some of them I knew I was going to remember, but there were a couple that were fading from my mind. Okay, here we go.
Drinking my jug of water.
I know.
Anybody on Facebook would just think, what's wrong with you?
Well hydrated. That's the real thing.
There you go.
Welcome back to Change It Up with Paula Shaw Radio. We are talking about breaking the money silence today, and if you've been with us, you've heard us interviewing Cheri Blair and I, who's sitting here next to me. You heard us interviewing Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, author of Breaking Money Silence, and also she is the founder of KBK Wealth Connection, and the host of a podcast which we highly recommend called Breaking Money Silence. She shared some great information with us, didn't she, Cheri?
Oh, yeah. She's just, she seems to be a natural with this information, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
She's put it together, but I think with her combination of finance
Mm-hmm.
and psychology and counseling is just is wonderful. And she breaks through a lot of, like she talks about myths, money myths, breaking money silence, shatters taboos, so on and so forth. So I think she's wonderful. I really do. But you know how strongly I feel about empowering women. I mean, empowering people financially. And then I have a sweet spot for women.
And I was fascinated by a lot of what Kathleen shared with us that was really that I thought didn't exist anymore, like the inequality of pay for men and women doing the same job. You know, I remember we marched about that in the 80s and 90s, and I thought it was a done deal.
No.
But now I'm disconnected.
Yes, well, I'm very aware of that. And so, in fact, she said, you know, women can expect to earn 80 cents on the dollar. Mm-hmm. But I remember, I mean, 80 cents is come quite a ways. It's you know, it's still been, I feel like that's high compared to where we've been. Uh-huh. And so I agree with Kathleen 100% in that we still have a ways to go. Mm-hmm. I mean, I look at the younger, we talk about the millenniums and the younger generations, and they, you know, I think they're really going to be a big part of the change.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely.
In the future. I mean, and bringing about the change. But no, this has been something that I've been fighting on and working with, I know, since I was in college. Mm-hmm. And you talk about that. So, no, it hasn't gone away.
No, it hasn't gone away. And thank goodness. You know, I mean, we're living in an incredible time. We really are. Because one of the other things Kathleen pointed out is that women of color were only making 64 cents on the dollar compared to, you know, what men are making, or 64 cents on the dollar that a man's making. That blew me away. I mean, but it's like it always blows me away when I see discrimination of any kind, because it makes no sense. I feel like so many of us are so clear now that we're all one, that I don't understand where that motivation comes from for people to look at others as less than they are. But I realize when I hear the kind of information that Kathleen shared with us today, we got work ahead of us.
Yes,
There's
we do.
Still
Yes,
a lot
we
of
do.
work to do.
Yes, we do.
You know,
we
and
do.
there are people, and women are one of those groups. There are groups in this country that are not getting a fair shake, and we need to turn all of that around. And particularly because you've pointed out so many times, Cheri, women are living longer than men.
Right, absolutely.
Right? And
yes.
we need the money to live on. So we have to know how to get it together and how to use it wisely, right?
Right. And absolutely. And one of Kathleen's statistics that we didn't get to touch, but she, you know, talks about that people age 65 and older, more than twice as many women as men live in poverty. That was based on a number, 2013. So that was 5 years ago, but still twice as many women live in poverty after 65. Now that's really huge, I believe. It's like we that's, you know, a woman that has been, whether she's working in the home or working outside of the home, but then all of this, you know, and then she's 65 or, you know, thereabouts or a little older, and maybe she's a widow, maybe she's divorced, you know, and she's put out all this time and energy and focus on other people, and here she is, and she has to live in poverty. That's just sad.
That is just wrong.
That's sad.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. And I wonder if part of that is because of this, what we've been talking about today, because women weren't really taught about investing. I mean, obviously you learned all these things and other women have, but as a whole, I remember when I was in college, a woman was going to be a teacher, a home economist, or a nurse. Exactly. You remember.
Yeah.
And nobody, I don't remember anybody I know that was going to be a financial advisor, a woman. Not one I can think of. And yet, obviously, that's turned around, and thank goodness it's an important thing. But I think we also made a really important point today about a lot of women still have the idea it's not feminine to be the one that's knowledgeable about money and handling investments and a lot of that kind of thing. Or that's a man's job. It's just a mindset that our culture has.
And she talked about that. I mean, how do we change? What are some of the things we can do? And obviously, we have to look at our mindset. We have to listen to shows like this. We have to listen to shows like hers. We need to read books like this, and we need to be having the conversations. And sometimes they're difficult conversations, but like she said, I think it was a good idea. So I love the podcast, but let's say I'm a financial advisor, and there's still areas with my husband and I, that financial areas that he just doesn't converse with very well. And I feel like, hey, this is what I do. You should be talking about this, so on and so forth. But, to say, I've listened to this podcast, or, I love this podcast from Kathleen because he knows how much I enjoy her work. So, I think it would be great to listen to together.
Yeah.
Just to get the conversation
that
going.
idea.
Yeah.
And because then you're not necessarily just talking about your finances. You're talking about a concept or a myth, as she was saying. She breaks the myths. So that's kind of a nice way, sort of a backdoor way to open that conversation up about money.
Right. Absolutely. And it takes the emphasis, like you said, off of yourself or your relationship or things like that, because we all know that talking about money with your partner sometimes can be very difficult.
It really can. And, in the beginning of the show, Cheri, I was sharing some of the major blocks people have, why they can't have these conversations about money. Some of them are cultural norms, like we were just discussing. A lot of it is genetic signatures that have been passed down to them from their ancestors. And that's huge.
I think that's just,
if your ancestors lived through the Depression, which most of ours did, then there are attitudes about being frugal or putting it away or having that little jar, or under the mattress, right? Not even trusting the institutions with the money.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I still see that, and I have for many years. The residue of that somebody that did grow up in the Depression, like for instance, my mother. She was born right after the Depression, but it was the way that she was raised because it was right afterwards. So she has that, that sense of that consciousness of like, well, you can't ever waste anything,
right?
And still to this day. And I've seen it with clients, many clients over the years that are older that have either lived through it or they had a parent they were born right after it, and they just that. So yes, absolutely. I think.
So I would love to share with our listeners a little bit about how I would approach something like this. Like, let's say someone's a limiting subconscious belief, like maybe it's a woman has a belief like, well, it's not feminine, or I'm not smart enough, or I don't have a head for numbers, or, a lot of that kind of thing. And while it is anatomically true that men have a bigger left brain than women, we have a very big right brain, and we're very good at moving between left and right brain.
You're right.
So there's nothing that says we can't learn it. We need seminars like the ones that you present, but sometimes we need work actually moving that subconscious block.
Right, absolutely.
So some of the tools that I use, like for example, if a woman was holding a belief like, I'm not smart enough to handle the family finances.
Right.
We would have her actually focus on that belief, and maybe she would be doing EFT, which means we're going to tap meridian points as she's saying the things she believes.
Right.
And what we know about why that works, and all energy psychology processes work that way, in that we focus on the problem,
Right.
while we're doing some kind of implementation or intervention on the energy system.
Right. Right.
So what they saw in a study they did at Harvard was that when you focus on the problem, the amygdala fires up. And that's the part of the brain that prepares us for fight, flight, or freeze.
Mm-hmm.
When we tap, so when we're tapping those same points they use in acupuncture, it sends calming signals to the amygdala. So it's kind of rewiring the brain to basically say, you can chill, even though this reality still exists. So we don't have to be afraid, or we don't have to be limited by those beliefs that most of us don't even know we hold.
That's huge. That's huge. And I just put your name out on something the other day on Facebook, and I said, if you have limiting beliefs like this, get a hold of Paula Shaw.
Oh, well, thank you. But yes, limiting beliefs are holding us back, and most people out there don't have any idea that their subconscious is running the show. But it is. It's 95% of your mind functioning versus 5% conscious.
That's wild. I mean, 95%. It's
huge. And unfortunately, we are out of time, but we have really enjoyed being with you all today, talking about breaking money silence and opening up our minds and our attitudes about dealing with money, especially as women. So thank you for listening. You can hear us on KCBQ, AM 1170, The Answer, on Sunday evenings at 9. And we're on every major podcast platform. And please be sure and check out our Change It Up Radio Facebook page, Instagram page, and Change It Up Radio YouTube channel. So we look forward to seeing you all with us next week. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Bye.
And thank you to Cheri.
Thank you.
All right. So Facebook live streamers, thank you for being with Cheri Blair and I. And we will look forward to seeing you next week. So have a great rest of the day. Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye now.